Hello, and welcome back as we start the day 3 of our sessions on impact in your business. Today, we're going to be looking at the importance of baselines as a foundation of demonstrating your impact. We're going to identify baselines for your company and community that are going to help you tell a strong story and build credibility with funders around you. So I want to start quickly with just understanding a little bit about what a baseline is. It shows progress by memorializing where you and the community have started, because people can quickly forget where they come from. And a little bit more definitional, an impact baseline is a crucial tool for demonstrating the positive change your company has made or plans to make. It provides a clear and measurable starting point, allowing investors and other stakeholders to understand the scale of your impact and the progress you've achieved. So this right here, you'll see, is a clear example of impact. We have the before, where it's an empty field and a group of people coming together, and then we have the after, which is showing a forest that has clearly been the result of the hard work these people have put in. Perhaps for your company, you'll also be able to show stories with that much amazing detail. So just to talk a little bit about what a story is. In general, when you go to the movies, when you read a book, there's something that keeps you interested, and it goes through many steps. So we see Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 listed here in the slide. In Act 1, it's the introduction, what we're calling the exposition here. What's going on? What is the state like now, or a little bit before, and what's going on? In the middle, Act 2, we have a conflict, something that's interesting, something that catches us, something that's wrong, that's making things not as good as it used to be. And then we have leading to a climax where there's some action, there's something that's going on that's going to make a difference in that conflict. And then we talk about the resolution, which is how are things ending up? So if we kind of apply this story arc to the story of your company, we can start to create something that will be interesting and make sense and allow people to really see how your company is making a difference. And the baseline plays a key part in that story. So when we apply this kind of framework here, we see we have 4 things that we're going to be focusing on for our impact stories: exposition, conflict, climax, and resolution. And the baseline applies in the resolution. So exposition is, what was the situation like in your community or in your landscape? Good or bad, and why? Conflict, what was the problem or what has caused that problem? What can we learn a little bit from the problem? Climax, what has your company done in order to assist with that problem? And resolution, what are the changes observed from baseline until now? So I want to share a little bit more detailed template of how this could be applied. And the point of this workshop right now that we're doing, this session, is to get you to think about what your company's story will be so that you can then apply that on your websites and your slide decks. And so that you can think about what are those statistics that you're going to show in that last section called resolution that's going to build the trust and the confidence that you want to engender with the stakeholders that you have. So for an impact story, we're going to say that in this impact story, everything started out as a great ecology. The plants and the animals lived in harmony. This might be a situation that you would be starting out with in your story as well. But then there was a conflict. In this case story, humans came in and changed that ecological harmony through many things, perhaps deforestation, perhaps mining, perhaps unsustainable agricultural practices, or agricultural practices that might have extended into forest land or grassland. The climax would be, well, now my company is providing a solution to these problems through, and now you're going to be able to think of how your company is providing solutions: agroforestry, silvopasture, crop diversification, organic fertilizers that you make on the farm. You're going to be able to tell us that. And that's going to be a really great story. But the thing that's really going to make it stand out, that's going to make you credible, up until then, it's a conceptual story that we can all understand. But this last part where you talk about what are the changes, that is where you're going to be able to show credibility. You can talk, and that's what we're going to be focusing on for the rest of the session, is identifying what are those changes, what was the place like in the beginning and what was it like in the end. So for instance, in this case study, maybe we would say once the deforestation came in, it left a bare land that no one could use anything. There was literally no vegetation. And now we've been bringing in, let's say, avocado trees mixed with native trees and fodder trees on the fence lines. So you can start to say, we've revived the land to have so many more trees per hectare, and that has allowed some of the farmers to move back and profit from the land. So these are going to be numbers that you're going to be able to look at. So that's where the KPIs and the KPIs at baseline and the KPIs now or in the future are going to become a part of that story that we're talking about. And we have one more story here just to share in case this one is more like your situation. Impact story number 2, the exposition, is we're starting on land that's already been agricultural land. For many years, it had been very great for the farmers. They've been able to raise and take care of their families well. However, this conflict is, over the years, climate change had made it so farmers could not make a living from their land. Maybe the rains weren't coming anymore, and they needed to switch to new crops. Perhaps other things might have changed this. There might be other reasons for the conflict. Maybe pastoralists are grazing on your land. Maybe there's unsustainable farming practices. Maybe market forces have changed in your region, and people don't want the crops that traditionally have been grown. So there will be a conflict, and you can discuss what it is. Now, your company is providing a solution. It's a solution that sells on the market, provides income, and it also works with the ecology. So you'll explain to us what that is, and then you'll tell us those changes are that can prove to us that your company is really making that difference. We took measures of the income that the farmers in the region were making before our company came in, and after we saw that they improved their income by 50%. Or we took a look at the soil quality as measured by the percolation rate before our company started bringing trees to the farmland, and we took a look at it afterwards, and we can see that the soil quality has gone up, which has led to more higher yield on the land. You can come up with these KPIs to talk about the before and the after as it forms a part of this story. So let's go back to the baselines now. We've got to establish a baseline measurement. And so to do that, you're going to have to figure out what KPIs that you want to measure, which we have started to do that in our second day of our session on impact. So collecting the data, gathering information on the current state of the situation or before your intervention, looking towards reliable sources, credible methods and data collection tools, and looking at historical trends. You can analyze past data to identify patterns and benchmarks as well. Once you do that, you'll want to look at what are targets. So what were things like before that you started coming? What are they like now? And you also have targets to improve that further. And how could your company help achieve those targets? You then want to start thinking about when you want to track that progress and how you want to report on that as well. So that might be that you want to collect that data every month, every 6 months, every year. It depends on what exactly that key performance indicator is. And then you want to tell that compelling story, which is what we've been focusing on so far today, is understanding how these data can fit into a storytelling context. To go back to some examples of baselines, we just want to take you through a few of them so that you might be able to see some examples for yourself that you might be able to adapt for your company. So we have social impact KPI baselines. Perhaps it's a number of individuals served by your company. That could be the number of clients, the number of buyers, perhaps the number of employers, the number of smallholder farmers that sell to you. So you're tracking the total number of people. You might want to look at percentage of target population reached. So let's say that you are working with a gum Arabic company and they're in the community where you work. Let's say there's 1,000 families. How many of those can you employ in your value chain? Maybe you started off by employing 10 and maybe you're up to 100 families. And that's 10% of the families in the community. Can you increase that number to 200? And how would you do that? And is that a goal you want to have? Can you talk about improvement in the quality of life of your community members, whether that is the people who buy your products or the people who help manufacture or supply inputs to your products? And so you could take a look at income, you could look at working, perhaps working standards, perhaps people before they started working with your company, worked for another company and they had to work 12 hours and they didn't have breaks, but you were able to provide these kind of policies that supported better quality of life. So these are KPIs that you can talk about before and after. Another could be reduction in social issues. Perhaps there was a decline in social problems such as poverty, homelessness, or crime. I have one example of an entrepreneur in Kenya who helps teach pastoralist communities how to raise their own grass. And then they can use that to feed their cows, especially in times of drought. And they can also sell their extra grass, because they're actually so good at doing it, to other people who are raising livestock. And this keeps livestock raising communities from needing to graze as widely and grazing into farming communities' land. So this actually reduces social conflict between pastoralists and farmers. So this is a story that they can talk about, and they might have statistics on that, talking about the number of families who no longer have to graze outside of their specific areas. Could be a number of families before and a number of families of afterwards. But it's this whole idea of before and after. So for financial sustainability KPI baselines, you can look at your company and see how much revenue from various sources is your company earning, from donations, grants, or earned income. You can also look at the income growth of your employees or your smallholder farmers in your network, and you'll be able to measure that over time. This one can actually be also easy to track, because if you are buying from smallholder farmers, then you should be keeping track of that as your financial record keeping, and your costs of goods, which would be your costs to purchase, let's say a macadamia nut or avocados, is going to be a line item on your financials. So say this year you were able to buy 2,000 tons of avocados, and you know that cost you $2. That's a lot of tons. let's say about 1 ton of avocados, and that costs you $5,000. You know that $5,000 went straight to the community, and you could make some average calculations about how much money each community member got from you. So if you spent $5,000 in avocados and you spent that across 10 farmers, that means on average, each of the farmers in your network got $500 income growth. So these are numbers that you can keep track of. And you also will want to keep track of your company profit margin as a measure of how efficient your company is and how it will be then able to predict its growth or impact in other areas. And we have some environmental impact KPIs as well. You might be able to take a look at carbon footprint reduction. So I know many companies in Africa who have, as they've grown, been able to take advantage of programs to install solar panels, and they can literally figure out how much they were able to cut in greenhouse gas emissions by looking at previous electric bills and current electric bills created, how much energy that they are generating from solar panels, for instance, as an example. You can also talk about if you were able to conserve resources. Were you able to make farmers use less water, perhaps because you have provided them with a different quality seed that is more drought resistant, or perhaps because you have provided them with a certain kind of fertilizer or organic input that reduces the amount of water that certain crops need. So you can take a look at this if that applies to your company. You can look at waste reduction. I know many companies who are here in this program are utilizing agricultural waste to make anything from feed for livestock to fertilizers to fermentation for vinegars. So you can talk about the waste that was diverted from landfills as well. And you can also talk about positive environmental impact. So it's not always about reducing negative impacts, but sometimes you're creating positive impacts as well. More trees, perhaps more species are showing up. Your biodiversity is increasing. Perhaps you're having more income diversity because of the crop diversity. So these are positive things that can happen in the environmental impacts of your company. But some people might be watching this video and they might have already launched a company, and they might have said, wait, I didn't create a baseline when I first launched my company. That can be okay. There are different ways to get around that to still show your impact. You can start to think about your land and your communities and comparing them with other communities that have not adopted your company's intervention. So are your communities doing better? For instance, I visited a farm in India once that was using these organic inputs from a company that we were working with. I saw the onions. They were literally the size of grapefruits, straight and tall and gorgeous, using half the water. I saw the farmer next door. The onions were still in the ground. They were the size of golf balls. The stalks were falling all over the place, and they're using so much water and so many pesticides. And I could see that right next door. So even if I didn't have direct comparison from perhaps before that farmer started using the input, I could see next door what was happening without that input going on. You can also ask your participants, perhaps via surveys or in-person or phone interviews, to share about their situation before and after your company and see if you can get believable trends. how much money did they make? How hard was their job? How many hours are they working every day? How confident do they feel about their situation? What percentage of their produce are they able to sell these days with your company and before your company? So you can start to get these stories. They can still provide credibility as to what your intervention is doing for the community. So again, a few other things that you can do. Survey your smallholders, ask them how much they earned or what their situation was like before or after your company. You can tally up the funds that you've provided to your farmers and get the average increase of income of your farmer network. You can also take pictures, before and after pictures of the land, so you can show visually what's happened before and after your company. And if you can't do before and after, you can do a picture of your farmers and what they've been doing. And you can visit another farm who might be practicing, let's call it conventional monocrop farming. And you can talk about those differences. And we have a few more baselines to share with you in case it helps generate additional clarity in what you can do for your story. Biodiversity confirmation, conservation, or increasing biodiversity. Perhaps you're able to count the species present within your company's operation areas. And perhaps you guys have strategies where you'd like to increase that biodiversity. So you might want to increase the biodiversity by a certain percent in a certain number of years. So for instance, you might want to bring beehives or bee boxes of 2 or 3 different bee species that are compatible with your region. And you might want to do that over 5 years, and you'd be able to measure that as an example. You might want to look into sustainable sourcing. What materials are coming from sustainable suppliers? So if you are an agro-product, let's call this processor, maybe you're buying mangoes or passion fruit from different farmers, but perhaps you have identified some procedures that they should be using that would be more sustainable. Maybe it's using organic fertilizers and pesticides. Perhaps it is using organic certified seeds. Perhaps it is interspersing native trees with some of the producing trees. And you want to increase your sourcing farmers by a certain percentage in a certain number of years. That can be a goal that you have. You also might be looking at training employees. So looking at the baseline of how many employees are trained on environmental sustainability. And you might have a certain number of employees that you'd like to train within a certain number of years. And a few more baselines as well. We are looking at community engagement as a baseline. The number of community outreach initiatives and the number of attendees that you've had per year. You might want to increase that if that's a goal of yours and something you want to talk about on your website. And of course, income generation. How much money per year is an average smallholder earning overall or particularly with your company? That's something that you might want to check out. One more example is soil quality. So some entrepreneurs here really like to talk about how their company's practices result in better soil quality. So that could result, if you want to do that as a KPI you'd like to report on, you might want to look at exactly what are the kinds of measures that would go along with soil quality. One might be soil percolation rate. It might be carbon percentage, your carbon levels in the soil. It might be nutrient levels in the soil. And then you'll have to measure that before and after and talk about how your company has made that change. What things has your company done that has made that change happen? In this example here, we're talking about soil percolation rates, and the company has a goal of either hiring or lowering the rate of percolation. That depends on the starting point of their soils and what goals that they need to further achieve. So once again, these baselines are used to support your business stories. You can create these stories for your website, share those statistics. You can add these statistics to your 12-slide pitch. But basically, it's all about how data is going to support you in your storytelling. So now that we've gone through all of this, we want you to answer the following questions for your company. We want you to take the time to think and to write this down so that you can start to identify your own stories. Because it all starts with concepts. So conceptually speaking, what was the land like before your company came? And how has the land improved because of my company? Feel free to browse back through all of those KPIs that we've done yesterday and today to see if you can find specific ways that the land has improved because of your company. Next, how was the community living before my company? That might be working standards, that might be insecurity about the market. They didn't know where to sell. They might have had half of their produce that they couldn't sell. Perhaps the crops they were growing were dying because not enough nutrition in the soil, or maybe too much sun, not enough rain. Well, how was the community living before your company? And how have the lives of the community members improved since your company's intervention? And specifically, again, we want to go back to the concept of better than business as usual. How are these outcomes that you've identified better than other companies that have been working in the region? What is your company doing that's different? That's going to really make your story pop. So once you got a chance to think of those questions conceptually, we want you to take some homework and to create your own impact story using the framework that we went over today of exposition, conflict, climax, and resolution. Now, of course, when you actually tell this story, either when you write it down and throw it on your webpage on the impact section, or when you talk about it briefly during your presentations to investors, you're not going to say exposition, conflict, climax, and resolution. No, we don't say that in the movies either. But we want you to use this as a framework to make things easy, as building blocks, so that you can tell an engaging story. So exposition, what was the situation like, good or bad, and why? Conflict, what was the problem? What caused the problem? Why was it bad? Climax, what has your company done to assist with that problem? And resolutions, what are these changes that can be observed from the previous times until now, and perhaps plans for the future for your company to further improve their impact? So these are your homework. And these kind of solutions can really help in your pitch decks, especially when we're talking about traction and when we're talking about catching people's attention. So when you want to catch people's attention, you usually tell stories. This storytelling can happen in the first 30 seconds to 1 minute of your pitch presentation. And when you're talking about traction, you usually want to have data to back up the fact that your company is doing great work. Because you can say it's doing great work, but if you can point to numbers that are verifiable from external sources or data that you've collected from hundreds of farmers, then it's going to be much more believable, because people want to help entrepreneurs that are already making a difference, people who are already leaders in their communities. So this is all bringing it together so that you can create that kind of trust with your stakeholders and that you can go forward and do more of what you're doing, which will allow you to have a bigger impact, which will allow you to actually be more profitable and grow your business. So I want to thank you for today, and really looking forward to seeing the kinds of impact stories that they should be showing up in the first couple of slides of your pitch deck, and they should be showing up on your websites under the impact section of your website. And we hope to see photos, we hope to see graphs, and that's what we're going to take a look at tomorrow. It's once you have this story kind of conceptualized, how can we communicate it? So look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and you guys are going to be amazing impact entrepreneurs, and we're all going to see the impact you're taking, and very excited for that. Have a good one.